Presentation. PowerPoint presentations are a staple of school and college life. While the basics of PowerPoint are relatively easy to learn, it takes a little more care to learn to create presentation slides that will engage your audience rather than overwhelm or bore them. Introduction. Typically, the purpose of a PowerPoint presentation is to provide a visual aid for a live presentation you're making to your class or other audience. The slides are not there to convey all your content, they're there to support your performance. Be aware that your readers are primarily listeners who will just scan your content rather than reading it carefully. They should be able to glance at your slides to get your point quickly. Try to do the majority of the research and planning for your presentation before you brainstorm your slides. Your slides should contain only the high points of the talk, the important points, to help your audience follow and understand your presentation. The outline for your slide deck should essentially be the high-level outline for your talk. Allow yourself time to go through a couple of drafts of your slides. If you do them at the last minute, your deck will likely be too long and not as focused as it should be. If possible, take a break after you create your first draft, then come back to it later with a fresh eye. Try to see your presentation through the eyes of your audience. Revise to streamline and ensure your slides are free from typos and other errors. Do keep your design simple. Your goal should be to create slides that are easy to scan. Do choose readable fonts and limit the number of fonts you use. Select fonts that look clean and clear on your slides. As a general rule, limit yourself to no more than 2 different fonts per slide. If you add more, your slide may look messy and distracting. Do keep text to a minimum. You should present just your main points on your slides. When presented with a very text-heavy slide, people will do one of 2 things: zone out or read it. A zoned-out audience is obviously a disaster, but an audience that's too busy reading to listen can be equally bad. Do use light backgrounds and dark text. White or other light-colored lettering is difficult to read. Do use animation sparingly and strategically to support the message of your presentation. The golden rule is, if it enhances the meaning and clarity of your presentation, use it. If it competes with your content and distracts people, don't. Do, in bullet points, use parallel grammatical constructions to help people follow your ideas easily. Do use formatting effects like boldface and italics sparingly and consistently. Unless they clearly support your message, avoid using these potentially distracting formatting tools. Do proofread your slides carefully. Ideally, have someone else who is not familiar with the presentation proof it for you. A presentation that contains typos, misspellings, and punctuation errors can be very embarrassing. Don't crowd your slides with a lot of text and graphics. Slides with plenty of blank space are more inviting and easier to read. Don't write out your entire presentation on your slides. Remember, the slides should contain just your main points. If the whole content is on the slides, why does the audience need you? Don't present graphics or text that are too small or too detailed for the audience to see clearly. If you have a key chart or table that is complex, present a simplified version of it on your slide and give the audience the full version, printed on hard copy, to examine more closely. Don't distract your audience with busy backgrounds. PowerPoint offers a lot of built-in graphics and backgrounds, but that doesn't mean you should use them. Don't use meaningless animation. Again, the fact that fancy animation tools are available doesn't mean they're a good idea for your presentation. Use animation when it can help you get your point across more successfully, not animation for its own sake. If the audience is sitting there thinking, "Cool animation," then they're not paying attention to your content. not like this. This slide is a dark gray color with white writing. There are two graphic images, one a beer stein in the upper left corner and the other a martini glass in the lower right corner. The slide's headline is written in a font that looks like handwriting. Repeal the Minimum Drinking Age Act. The body of the slide uses a font that is reminiscent of a Renaissance text, somewhat flowery and difficult to read. It is also rather small. It is organized in bullet point format, with each line having equal weight. Bullet point. In 1984, Congress passed the National Minimum Age Drinking Act. Bullet point. Effectively raising the legal drinking age to 21 in all 50 United States. Bullet point. The objective was to prevent alcohol-related deaths to young people ages 18 to 21. Bullet point. However, the Act is inconsistent with the other responsibilities and expectations American society places on 18-year-olds. Bullet point. What's more, the Act has not actually had the anticipated benefit of fewer drunk driving deaths, in spite of what some of its supporters claim. The last phrase is underlined. Bullet point. Because it has unfairly infringed on the rights of young Americans and because it has failed in its stated objective. Bullet point. The National Minimum Age Drinking Act should be repealed. Like this. This slide has a neutral white background with black writing. There is a graphic of a wine glass faded and in the background beneath the text. The font is uniform throughout and simple in style, easy to read. Repeal the Minimum Drinking Age Act. Bullet point. National Minimum Drinking Age Act. Subpoint. Passed by Congress in 1984. Subpoint. Raised drinking age to 21 in all 50 states. Subpoint. Intended to prevent alcohol-related deaths. Bullet point. Criticism of the Act. Subpoint. Inconsistent with the other rights and responsibilities of 18-year-olds. Subpoint. Has not reduced drunk driving deaths. Bullet point. The Act should be repealed. Exam essay question. An essay exam is enough to strike fear in the heart of many diligent and hard-working students. Unlike with quantitative tests, it's very difficult to know if you're getting the answer right when the answer is in essay form. Fortunately, there are methods to prepare for such tests and techniques you can use during the test to ensure that you perform at your very best. The advice here isn't a substitute for studying the material, of course, but it will help you put your best foot forward when it comes to writing an in-class essay exam. Introduction. Essay questions have several purposes: to demonstrate your knowledge of the subject, to demonstrate that you can synthesize the knowledge you have, to show your ability to think on your feet, and to demonstrate your writing skills. Your reader, that is your teacher or professor, should have made it clear what he expects from you on an exam. Ignore his guidance at your peril. Use your knowledge of your instructor to help you. What kinds of things does he think are important? What has he emphasized in his teaching? Brainstorm and organize your response before you start writing. You don't have the time to do it otherwise. When you receive the question, take time to think about it. Don't start writing until you know what you want to say. Make a brief outline and follow it as you draft. You won't have time to throw everything out and start over again. New ideas will probably come to you as you write. Fit them carefully into your existing outline and don't let them throw you off track. Once you've finished writing your essay, proofread and revise. It may be the last thing in the world you feel like doing, but a thorough proofreading can help you catch a lot of mistakes and omissions. If you have time, you may want to do a little rewriting to clarify your answer, but make sure that any revisions you make are legible and clear. Do answer the easy questions first. If the exam has multiple short essay questions, warm up by starting with the ones you feel most confident about. Do think. Do not panic. Allow yourself to get some ideas rolling before you put pen to paper. Do make sure you understand each question. If a question seems unclear to you, ask the instructor for clarification. Do check to be sure how many questions are really being asked under the guise of a single question. How many parts will your answer have? Do read the question carefully and answer the question asked. A good essay on a related topic is not as good as a fair essay that actually answers the question. Be sure you understand the question before you start outlining and writing. To keep yourself on track, try beginning your essay by restating part of the question in your opening sentence. Do make sure your essay has a clear beginning, middle, and end. In other words, an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Don't freak out if the answer doesn't come to you right away. Read over the different questions on the test, answer the ones you feel comfortable with, and try to relax and think calmly about the ones that seem less clear to you. Don't start writing before you've had time to think about your answer. You don't have to be writing every moment of the exam. You're far better off spending time thinking about and organizing your answer before you start writing than jumping in and starting to write before you're sure what you want to say. Don't feel that you need to write a long answer. A short, accurate essay is better than a long, rambling one. You're not being graded by the word, and teachers appreciate a concise, well-thought-out essay. Not like this. What were the primary causes of the American Revolution? The American Revolution, which began in 1775, gave rise to the greatest democracy the world has ever seen. This is a point that many people might dispute, and it's actually not relevant to the question asked. Don't feel you need to open your essay with a big, sweeping general statement. Focus on responding to the question. This student has got herself in trouble in the first sentence by making a questionable claim that doesn't even address the question. The 13 colonies were originally established by the British, who considered them their property to do with as they pleased. Over time, the colonists developed a sense of nationalism and began to desire self-determination rather than being governed by a king in a distant country. It was inevitable that the colonies would eventually organize to overthrow British tyranny. This is very general background. The student would be better off being more specific earlier in the essay. At this point, it still feels as though she doesn't know exactly what she wants to say. There were many causes for the American Revolution. Good. Simple and to the point. This student can throw out her entire first paragraph and begin here. The British colonial government imposed many taxes on the American colonists, including the Stamp Act, which required tax stamps to be placed on many things, even marriage licenses, the Townshend Acts, and the Sugar Act, which taxed sugar coming from the West Indies. The Crown also refused to allow the colonists to print their own currency. The Tea Act of 1773 gave the British East India Company a monopoly on importing tea to America. This led to the Boston Tea Party, where colonists disguised themselves as Indians and threw tea overboard into the harbor off British ships. The British responded with the Intolerable Acts, closing Boston Harbor and forbidding public gatherings. In addition, the British forced colonists to house or quarter British soldiers in their homes. Quartering Act, 1765. This paragraph contains a lot of data. Clearly, the student has been studying for the exam. However, it all comes out like a flood in a single paragraph with little or no internal organization. The writer feels rushed, as if she's under time pressure to get everything out of her brain and onto the page. The content is all fine, but it's not held together by an overarching structure, and in the end it doesn't respond to the question about the primary causes of the revolution. Finally, in 1775, the first open warfare of the Revolution occurred with the shot heard round the world at Lexington and Concord, when the British tried to seize the colonists' store of gunpowder. The revolution was underway, and the colonists would not stop until they had won their freedom from the British. The American Revolution brought about the greatest democracy in the world, and we should all be grateful to the brave colonists who fought for our rights. The student is making an effort to tie the essay together by referring back to her introduction, which is a good instinct. Unfortunately, the introduction wasn't really responsive to the question and was factually dubious. In addition, this conclusion is drifting into wider territory, beginning to discuss the indebtedness of contemporary Americans to the early revolutionaries. Resist the temptation to go off in a new direction when you write your conclusion, even if the rhetorical effect appeals to you. Like this. What were the primary causes of the American Revolution? The American Revolution had many causes, and the colonists had many grievances against British rule. This student gets right to the point in the first sentence of her essay. These grievances fall into three categories. First, the British caused the colonists financial hardship through taxes and duties. Second, the British restricted the personal freedom of the colonists. And finally, several incidents of physical conflict made the colonists resolve to overthrow British rule and form their own government. It's clear that the student has taken some time to organize her thoughts before she started writing the essay. She's organized her information into three categories to make her essay more coherent. The British imposed a series of taxes and duties that the colonists found severe and unfair. Each of the paragraphs begins with a topic sentence that makes it easy to see the development of the argument. The Sugar Act imposed duties on sugar imported from the West Indies. The Stamp Act of 1765 forced colonists to buy tax stamps for many different kinds of goods and services, including newspapers, playing cards, and even marriage licenses. Another tax came about through the Townshend Act, which taxed glass, paper, and tea. In 1773, the British gave a monopoly on the tea trade to the British East India Company, inciting the Boston Tea Party incident. After this series of taxes and duties, the colonists were frustrated and angry. Each paragraph has a closing sentence that sums up the effect of the events described in the paragraph. The British also imposed restrictions on the freedom of the American colonists. They were forbidden to settle west of the Appalachian Mountains. They were forced to quarter and feed British soldiers in their own homes. And after the Boston Tea Party, the British passed the Intolerable Acts, which closed Boston Harbor and outlawed public gatherings. Americans felt their freedom was being abused. Finally, the student uses clear transitional devices to mark the progress of her argument. The American revolutionaries rallied around several incidents in which British soldiers shot colonists. The Boston Massacre of 1770 turned many colonists against the British. The incident at Lexington and Concord, known as the Shot Heard Round the World, was an armed conflict in which the British were believed to have shot first. 8 colonists were killed. This event was the first open conflict of the Revolutionary War. The American Revolution took many years to build to a head, and many different incidents shaped the way it happened. In the end, it was a combination of forces and happenings that drove America to gain independence. This brief closing paragraph connects back to the introduction and wraps up the essay. Overall, the writing in this essay isn't fancy, but it's clear, accurate, and easy to follow. It's better to write a clear essay with little rhetorical flourish than to write a flowery essay that's hard to follow. Core Writing Assignments. 5 Keys to Successful Writing in High School and College. Good writing skills are important to your success in many classes, from humanities to social sciences, and even in some hard science classes. These 5 tips will improve your results in all your writing assignments. Number 1. Understand the assignment. Have you ever started working on an assignment only to realize later you're doing the wrong thing? Before you begin work on any writing assignment, be completely sure you understand what's being asked of you. Read your assignment very carefully before you start work. Take note of what exactly you're being asked to do. Describe, analyze, argue, discuss, compare, and so on. Confirm the expected length of the paper. If you're at all uncertain about what the assignment requires, don't guess. Ask your instructor for clarification. Number 2. Start early. The all-nighter is probably the most familiar rite of passage in upper-level classes, but it's no fun. You can save yourself the misery and produce a better result if you allow yourself plenty of time to complete your writing assignment. Read the assignment carefully as soon as you get it, and then budget your time sensibly. Allow yourself time to do any necessary research and to think carefully about what you want to say. It takes time to develop an interesting idea, and leaving your paper till the night before will compromise the quality of the finished product. Save yourself the last-minute panic by getting started early on your writing assignments. Number 3. Use drafts. If you've started early on your writing assignment, you'll have time to write multiple drafts, which is hands down the best way to ensure you'll be able to hand in a polished final paper. Working with drafts will show you if you have thin places in your paper that require more research or deeper thought. Some instructors are willing to read a first draft of an essay and give you feedback before you hand in the final assignment, and it's a good idea to take advantage of this offer. To make the most of writing multiple drafts, you must be willing to make substantive revisions, not just cosmetic ones. Let your ideas grow and develop over time, and your final product will be something you can be proud of. Number 4. Be sure you know what you mean. Because ideas can change and evolve over the course of writing an essay, your later drafts may seem somewhat disjointed. What you thought when you first started writing the essay might not be exactly what you think by the time you finish it. Rather than just giving up and handing in your paper, go back and reread it carefully. Try reverse outlining to analyze what you currently have in your draft. Refer back to early in this book for guidance on reverse outlining. Check to see if your thesis is clear and if the body of your paper supports that thesis throughout. Check to see if your conclusion fits the entire essay. If necessary, spend some time bringing all the elements of your paper into alignment. As a paper goes through successive drafts, it may get messier before it gets cleaner, but the process of revision will help you clarify your thoughts, and you'll end up with a stronger paper in the end. Number 5. Proofread. Proofreading your final draft carefully is a critical last step. It can be hard to make yourself proofread at this stage, but don't shortchange yourself. You've worked hard on your paper, and it would be a shame to lose grade points because of sloppy errors. Ask a friend to proofread your writing for you. They'll be more likely to catch errors that your eyes might just pass over. Beware of spell checkers. They can let errors slide by. Give your paper one more careful review before you submit it for a grade. Expository writing. Expository writing is writing that is used to explain, describe, or otherwise convey information. It is based in facts and may be used to support an argument or claim. Forms of non-expository writing include creative writing, and journalistic writing. Most school and college writing assignments require some form of expository writing. The techniques of expository writing are used in assignments like interpretive essays, argumentative essays, comparative essays, presentations, research papers, scientific papers, and history essays, among others. These techniques may include one or more of the following. Description. Present characteristics, features, and examples in order to describe, useful in many different kinds of writing assignments. Sequencing. Present items or events in numerical or chronological order, useful in process descriptions, historical essays, and scientific papers. Comparison. Explain how two or more things are alike and how they are different, used in comparison and contrast essays, also useful in some argumentative and interpretive essays, as well as some history essays. Cause and effect. Present one or more causes and the resulting effect or effects, useful in process essays, history essays, and science papers. Problem and solution. State a problem and propose one or more solutions for the problem. A variation is the question and answer format, useful in argumentative essays, social science and history essays, and science papers. How to write a thesis statement. A thesis statement is a short statement, usually just one sentence, declaring what your essay is going to be about. It proposes the idea or position you are going to argue for in the paper. Your thesis statement lays down a kind of road map for you as you plan and write your paper, and it also helps your reader follow your argument as it develops. If readers have a clear idea of your argument as a whole, they'll have an easier time understanding its parts. A thesis statement is a necessity in any kind of argumentative essay in any field. If you're setting out to prove a point, you'll need a thesis statement. Be aware that instructors do not always ask explicitly that you include a thesis statement in your paper. They may assume that you will create one. If you're unsure about your instructor's expectations about the paper, ask for clarification. A thesis is not the same as a topic. A topic is a broad, general subject. A thesis presents a specific and focused point of view about part of that topic. Refer to the table to follow to understand how a thesis statement can be developed from a topic. A good thesis statement has several characteristics. Asserts your point of view. A thesis statement expresses a position and sets up the rest of the essay to convince the reader that point of view is correct. A thesis is necessary to making a persuasive case in writing. Justifies discussion. A thesis statement makes a claim that others may disagree with and is therefore worth talking about. A thesis that simply states the obvious, one that everyone would agree with, doesn't make for interesting reading and doesn't allow you to develop an argument. Expresses a single main idea. Limiting your thesis statement to a single idea makes your paper easier to follow and understand. You'll also find it's easier to develop a paper around a single main idea than around a complex and multifaceted idea. How to develop a thesis statement. Developing a strong thesis statement is a process that may take some time. It doesn't often happen that your thesis statement pops into your head fully formed. To develop a thesis statement, start with a topic that interests you and work toward narrowing it down. Consider if you have enough evidence to support your argument. It may take several iterations before you find a specific thesis statement that you can support. Thesis development from topic table. Topic: Women in Shakespeare. Possible thesis: women characters sometimes disagree with male characters. Thesis: female characters in Shakespeare's history plays challenge the honor-based view of war that the male characters espouse. Topic: Watergate. Possible thesis: Watergate changed Americans' expectations of presidential politics. Thesis: The Watergate scandal led to a greater tolerance of dishonesty in presidents and presidential candidates among U.S. voters. Topic: Exercise. Possible thesis: Exercise helps control weight. Thesis: Weight loss programs that include exercise are more successful than those that don't. Do your best to come up with a specific and defensible thesis before you start writing your paper. Having a clear idea of your thesis at the start of the writing process can save you a great deal of time. However, it's important to remain flexible as you write. You may find that your thesis changes as you develop your paper. Once you have a draft, go back and check to see if your thesis really does summarize the paper you've actually written. If not, be open to the idea of adjusting the thesis to bring it in line with the content of the paper. You may need to go through this process more than once. It's all part of developing and refining an argument. Personal essay. A personal essay is a reflection about something that's important to you, perhaps an event, a person, or a lesson learned. Personal essays are often required as part of the application for college admissions or scholarships. In that case, the committee is hoping to get a glimpse of who you are as a person and what's important to you, in addition to seeing how well you write. There are many ways to approach a personal essay. This section offers guidance to get you off to a good start. Introduction. The purpose of a personal essay is to share something about yourself, an experience, a relationship, a belief, and to reflect on it. In a personal essay, you invite the reader to know you better and perhaps to share your feelings. As you plan and write your essay, think about the experience of your readers. What do you want them to feel or think as they read your essay? What do you want them to understand by the end? Consider that you are taking the reader on a kind of journey, so pay attention to the experience you're designing for them. The section to come, Topics for Personal Essays, offers ideas to help you get started. Allow yourself plenty of time to brainstorm about what you want to write about and which details will reveal your story most effectively. The process of brainstorming may actually make you realize how important an event really was to you. Be sure you narrow your focus to something you can treat adequately with the page limits of the assignment. You may find it helpful to begin with just a loose organization for your essay and tighten it up as you rewrite. You should start with a minimum commitment to shaping a clear beginning, middle, and end to your essay, and you should be sure that the ending somehow harks back to the beginning. Write your draft freely and try to resist the impulse to edit or revise as you write. It's important to let your creativity flow. Your initial draft will almost certainly be too long. That's not a problem. You can trim it later. The important thing is to develop your idea fully. Once you have a draft, take a break from it. It's a good idea to ask a friend to read it and request feedback. Is anything unclear or confusing? Is it repetitive? Are there parts of the essay that drag and should be trimmed? Revise to tighten the essay. Topics for personal essays. If your instructor has asked you to come up with your own topic for your personal essay, you might find some inspiration among these sample topics. Use these suggestions to prompt your memory and start reflecting on what you want to write. A turning point in your life. A relationship that changed you. A loss. A difficult choice. An event that turned out very different from what you expected. Something that makes you angry. Something that makes you happy. Something you will never do again. An event that taught you something about yourself. An experience with food. An experience with an animal. A time when you did something wrong. A person who has influenced you. A childhood memory. A travel memory. A favorite pastime. A favorite place. A first in your life. Something that happened when you weren't paying attention. How you overcame a fear or prejudice. Do. Do be sure you understand the assignment. There are many different ways to write a personal essay. Be sure you know what your instructor expects from yours. Do focus on a single topic. It's better to focus on one event or idea and develop that fully than to skim the surface of several. Do write a strong beginning. Your opening should draw the reader into your essay and make them want to read more, instead of, "This summer I was determined to overcome my fear of heights." Try, "Dangling 350 feet above the ground was the last place in the world I wanted to be." Do feel free to use the word I. You may have been told in other writing classes that you were not to use the word I. In a personal essay, it's perfectly acceptable to write in the first person. In fact, it's expected. Do be honest. Your essay will be stronger if you don't try to sugarcoat an incident where you didn't behave very well, or when you write the real ending rather than the happy ending you would have wished for. Do show, don't tell. You'll hear this advice in many writing classes, and its objective is to help the reader experience what you experienced as vividly as possible. If you had intense emotions, don't just say so. Help the reader to feel them with you. For instance, say you're writing about the death of your beloved dog. Instead of saying, "I felt terrible," provide a scene that shows how you felt and brings the reader along. "I looked at Max's empty bed and realized I would never see him there again." Do consider using dialogue, if appropriate. If you do use dialogue, make sure it's interesting. Do give your essay a specific and engaging title that will pique the reader's interest. Instead of "A boating adventure," try "I know what swamp water tastes like." Instead of "My grandmother," try "A real-life Rosie the Riveter." Don't feel you need to begin the essay at the beginning of the experience. Consider beginning when the situation was the most absurd or dangerous or frightening. There's no need to relate the incident in strict chronological order. Starting with the most compelling part of the story will grab the reader's attention. Don't try to stuff too many themes or ideas into your essay. When we reflect on experiences, it's natural for our thoughts to wander. You may have learned several different lessons from an experience, but your essay will be more engaging if you concentrate on just one. Whatever your topic, make sure your essay has a single, tight focus. Don't feel you need to use flowery, literary language in your personal essay. This essay is about you, so you should feel free to write in your own natural voice. Don't be afraid to use humor. Sometimes the most compelling experiences are funny in some way, even if they don't seem funny at the time. Your essay doesn't have to be deathly serious to be meaningful. Like this. Better late than never. I know. All little girls are in love with horses. Not me. When I was in grade school, I had friends who were horse crazy, with posters of horses all over their bedroom walls. I wasn't interested. In fact, I've actually been afraid of horses all my life. When my best friend, Alex, had pony rides at her 8th birthday party, I wouldn't get on. When my Girl Scout troop went horseback riding, I stayed home. I don't remember having any particular bad experience with horses that caused me to fear them. They always just seemed very big and very stupid, and that seemed like a dangerous combination. When my family and I visited our cousins in England this summer, something changed. Our cousins live out in the countryside. They don't have a farm, but there are farms surrounding their house. One of their neighbors in particular caught my attention, a woman who rode by on horseback every morning, followed by a little girl riding a pony. The little girl couldn't have been much more than 6 years old. She wore a helmet that made her look like some kind of an insect, but under that big helmet she was always smiling. We waved and exchanged greetings as they rode by each day. Then one morning, the woman, who turned out to be named Rachel, asked me if I wanted to go out riding with them. My cousins had told her I was visiting from America, she said, and if I wanted to come out, she would be delighted. Of course, I said no. Rachel looked a little surprised. Her daughter, Caitlin, looked downright shocked. Caitlin stared at me as if she'd never heard anything so crazy. "Well, my love," Rachel said, "if you change your mind, you know where to find us." That night I thought about what had happened, and I felt bad. Had I offended them? Was I really that scared of horses? I thought and thought about Rachel, and especially about Caitlin, who had given me that look. Suddenly I didn't understand why I had said no. There was something about being in a different country, in a place so different from my own neighborhood, that made me see things differently. I decided to go riding with them. I turned up early the next morning, and Rachel welcomed me warmly. Caitlin stared. They gave me a big gray horse to ride whose name was Gulliver. I considered telling Rachel that I was afraid, but I didn't want to look stupid, especially in front of Caitlin. As we set out, I freaked out a little bit about how high off the ground I was. Horses are big. After a few minutes, though, it began to seem fine. We rode through some beautiful country with green rolling hills and dark mossy rocks. When we got to a flat area, Rachel asked, "Fancy a trot?" I nodded yes. This wasn't so bad. For people who don't know much about horses, a trot is a very rough gait. I bounced up and down on the saddle, hard. I tried hanging on to the saddle, but that wasn't much help. I could feel myself falling off, sliding off the side of Gulliver. And in that moment, I knew I had been right in the first place. Horses were big and stupid and dangerous. I was about to fall off one and be trampled to death in a foreign country. And then the horse stopped. He just stopped. Rachel turned and came back to me. Caitlin stared. I sat there clinging to the saddle. I was suddenly talkative, babbling like a little child. I thought I was going to fall off. I was really sure I was going to fall off. I was sliding off the side, and then he just stopped. "Of course he did," said Rachel calmly. "They're trained to stop if you're falling. Didn't you know?" "Really?" I squeaked. Rachel laughed. "Of course. They feel you falling, and they stop. It's in their training." Suddenly, horses didn't seem so stupid anymore. This one had definitely saved my life. We finished the ride quietly at a sedate walk. Back at the barn, I thanked Rachel and learned how to remove the tack and put the horses away. Once the horses were snug in their stalls, munching on their hay, Caitlin looked up at me with a smile. "Are you all right, then?" she asked. I smiled back. Yes, I was all right. Did I ride every day for the rest of the visit and come back to the United States an avid horsewoman? No. But I did go out riding with Rachel and Caitlin twice more, and we even trotted on one of those rides. And that time I didn't slide off. I was definitely all right, and maybe a little bit wiser than I had been. Writing strong paragraphs. The paragraph is an essential building block of every paper you'll write. Paragraphs break longer pieces of writing into small, easily digestible sections, and by doing so, they help the reader understand the flow of your argument or narrative. Learning to write a strong paragraph will help you organize your writing and express your ideas in a more logical and convincing way. Strong paragraphs usually have these 4 elements. Topic sentence. The topic sentence states generally what the paragraph is about. It is usually, but not always, the first sentence of the paragraph. Using a topic sentence helps readers understand the overall message of the paragraph and follow your argument from one paragraph to another. Unity. Strong paragraphs have unity. That is, a paragraph generally contains no more than one central idea. If you find yourself starting to write about a different idea, it's time to begin a new paragraph. Coherence. A paragraph should be internally coherent. All the sentences in the paragraph should support the topic sentence and should be connected logically to one another. Development. Paragraphs should be fully developed. The main idea of each paragraph should be adequately explained and supported through details and evidence. It is important to note that each paragraph in the body of the essay must have some logical connection to the thesis statement in the opening paragraph. Keep this information about paragraphs in mind as you plan your paper. As you write your draft, be aware that it's very easy to let your paragraphs drift. Once you have a complete draft, go back and read through each of your paragraphs to ensure they are as strong as possible. Is your topic sentence clear and specific? Does the paragraph deal with just one idea? Is the idea well developed and supported with appropriate details? Do the sentences in the paragraph flow logically, lending it internal coherence? Sample paragraphs. All the planets always appear close to an imaginary line across the sky, so objects located far from that line cannot be planets. The line is called the ecliptic, and it is followed, more or less, not only by the planets but also by the moon. The ecliptic is actually the path followed by the sun across the background of stars in the course of the year. Since the Earth is but one of the planets, and since all the planets orbit the sun in approximately the same plane, from our point of view, the planets and sun must follow roughly the same line across the sky. The moon orbits the Earth at only a slight angle to the plane of the planets, so it too always appears close to the ecliptic. Donald H. Menzel and J. M. Pasachoff, A Field Guide to the Stars and Planets. Boston, Houghton Mifflin, 1983. 6. In the 1780s, the Finsbury Peninsula was an almost empty expanse of fields and low-lying marshland. There were a few houses in the vicinity of the church, and there was a windmill in the field above the shipyard, but little else except for a few grazing cattle. Across the river from the shipyard, the ancient city of Rochester huddled beneath the Norman castle and cathedral, the gray stone towers and spires providing distinctive landmarks for ships heading upstream from the Thames estuary. A mile downstream, around a bend in the river, the red brick buildings of Chatham Dockyard hugged the waterfront, surrounded by wind-swept pastures and isolated farms. And to the east, beyond the Royal Dockyard, the river meandered through the desolate marshes, frequented only by seagulls, wading birds, and the occasional fisherman. David Cordingly. The Billy Ruffian, The Bellerophon and the Downfall of Napoleon. New York, Bloomsbury, 2003. 7-8. Ballet may not have a continuous record, but this does not mean it does not have a history. To the contrary, people have been practicing and performing it for at least 400 years. Classical ballet grew up in Europe's courts. At its origins, it was an aristocratic etiquette and political event as much as it was an art. Indeed, perhaps more than any other performing art, the history of ballet is bound up with the fate of kings, courts, and states. What happened to the European aristocracy since the Renaissance also happened, in complicated ways, to ballet. The steps were never just the steps. They were a set of beliefs, echoing as they did the self-image of a noble caste. These larger connections, it seemed to me, were the key to an understanding of the art, how ballet began, and what it became is best appreciated in light of the political and intellectual upheavals of the past 300 years. Ballet was shaped by the Renaissance and French classicism, by revolutions and romanticism, by expressionism and Bolshevism, modernism and the Cold War. It really is a larger story. Jennifer Homans, Apollo's Angels, A History of Ballet, New York, Random House, 2010, 24. Process Description Essay. The process description essay is a popular assignment in both high school and college English classes, and the skills involved can be useful in many different applications, including assignments in the sciences and social sciences, and in writing instructions of all kinds. Introduction. The purpose of a process description essay is to give the reader a step-by-step account of how a process occurs. A process description may also be used in writing instructions for carrying out a process. When you write a process description, it's important to understand your reader's level of knowledge about the content you're describing. Writing for an audience of experts may be different from writing for an audience that is unfamiliar with the process. Brainstorm your content by writing out the steps of the process in the order they occur. Organize your essay chronologically from the beginning of the process through the end. Include a brief introductory paragraph and a brief conclusion. As you write your draft, you may find that you've missed some steps or that you've conflated two steps into one. You can make adjustments when you revise. It's wise to show your draft to someone who is not familiar with the process you're describing. He can let you know if your description makes sense or if there is anything that needs to be clarified. Revise accordingly. Do be sure you understand the process thoroughly before you start writing your essay. Brainstorming your content by listing all the steps of the process is a good way to discover if you're missing any information. Do make sure your steps are of comparable size and scope. Don't merge two processes into a single step. Do use transitional words to show the order of steps and to indicate the time elapsed during and between steps. See the following section, Useful Transitional Expressions. Do choose a title for your essay that will help readers understand exactly what it is. Don't assume your reader is familiar with technical language unless that language is an integral part of the class. For instance, you don't have to explain chemical processes in detail if you're writing an essay for your chemistry teacher. If you're writing about the same process for a general audience, you should consider defining any technical terms you use. Don't conflate two steps into one. When you revise, check to be sure each step represents a single action or occurrence. Don't add extraneous commentary to your process description. Don't make your essay more complicated than it needs to be. Describe the process in a simple and straightforward way. Process description in the sciences. In science classes, a process description is considered different from a set of instructions. In the sciences, the term process description applies only to those processes that occur without the reader's intervention or participation. In that context, a process might be something like oxidation, evaporation, or photosynthesis, a phenomenon that occurs through a series of stages not influenced by the actions of the reader. Before you start your process description essay, be sure you understand what your instructor expects. Useful transitional expressions. Process essays are usually organized chronologically and proceed step by step. To help readers follow the progress from one step to the next, use transitional words and phrases that express time relationships, like these: after, at the same time, before, during, finally, first, second, third, immediately following, in the meantime, initially, last, later, meanwhile, next, simultaneously, while. Not like this. How to make a peanut butter sandwich. The peanut butter sandwich is a staple of American childhood. Most of us grew up eating them, and many of us still rely on them for a quick snack or informal meal. All very true, but this opening provides extraneous information rather than introducing the process description. Your introduction should set up the essay you're going to write, not make general commentary on a related topic. Making a peanut butter sandwich is simple. First, take 2 slices of bread of any variety. Spread the peanut butter on one slice and the jelly on the other. Put the 2 slices of bread together and voila! You have a peanut butter sandwich. There are many variations on this simple sandwich. First, there are different types of peanut butter you can choose from, crunchy or smooth. Then there is a variety of different jellies and jams that can change the flavor of the sandwich. Many people also use other additives to dress up the sandwich, from pickles to add tartness, to potato chips to add crunch, to marshmallows to add sweetness. Some people even deep fry a peanut butter sandwich, which is not recommended. Which you choose depends on your personality and your tastes. This student seems to have come to the end of the essay and felt he hasn't said enough, so he's added this last paragraph of filler about types of peanut butter and other ingredients. This information is tangentially related, but doesn't pertain to the actual process of making a peanut butter sandwich. Like this. How to make a peanut butter sandwich. Making a peanut butter sandwich is a 3-step process: gathering tools and ingredients, spreading the peanut butter on the bread, and putting the sandwich together. This is a very good opening that sets up the essay well. The first step in making a peanut butter sandwich is assembling the tools and ingredients you will need. For tools, you need a knife and a plate or cutting board. The ingredients you need include a jar of peanut butter and 2 slices of bread. This student has taken the time to think about the question first. He thought through the process carefully before he started writing. The result is that his essay is clear and well organized, and all of it is relevant to the question asked. In the second step, you will apply the peanut butter to the bread. Use the knife to extract peanut butter from the jar and spread it evenly on both pieces of bread. Finally, the writer uses transitional expressions to lead the reader through the steps of the process. Put the 2 pieces of bread together. The peanut butter will make them stick to each other. If you wish, you can then use the knife to cut the sandwich in half for ease of eating.